Alright, so we got everything set up the way we want to do it. Let's go launch another mission. Alright, so the next mission that we have not done yet is the 001 target practice. No limit. Let's get that one started.
Commence target practice. As a special treat, you can practice freely on any of the targets in the shooting range today. Shoot away. When you're done, head over to the exit.
Now this mission right here isn't really anything. There's one item that you can get. It's one camouflage item that you can get in this mission. But I want to use this mission to go over some briefing files so we can get a little bit more about the setting of this game. So we're going to go to Miller and we're going to ask him about the Cold War.
Costa Rica isn't alone. All of Latin America is getting swept up in the superpowers' Cold War. The whole ideological split between East and West. In the end, it's just a greedy scramble for wealth by the ruling classes. The Western bourgeois stand to lose everything if their countries go communist. After all, the communists want to abolish private property altogether. So the capitalist rulers desperately tried to halt the global spread of communism. Hence the phenomenon of red baiting. And the communists, for their part, didn't exactly stay true to their principles. They tried to escape class-based society, but between Stalin's autocracy and the rise of the nomenklatura, they ended up creating one anyway. Once people have power, they stop caring about equality. That's where communism, where society in general reaches its limits. The rulers only care about their own gain. The opposing side becomes a risk factor that threatens the profit, and thus the ongoing struggle between capitalism and communism was born.
And now, nuclear deterrence is part of the picture.
Exactly. They say nuclear weapons are the reason we haven't seen conflict on a global scale since World War II. The thought that your opponent might launch nukes against you sort of makes it tough to start an armed conflict, especially now that they've got intercontinental ballistic missiles. Nowhere is safe.
Of course, all that has caused military expenditures to skyrocket.
Well, the only way to ward off a preemptive strike is to flaunt your own nuclear stockpile, and that's caused their numbers to increase exponentially, not just with regards to destructive power, but in terms of targeting technology too. Now they can hit a target halfway across the world with pinpoint accuracy. In a way, the space race was a demonstration of that technological progress.
And as a result of all that, we now have mutually assured destruction.
It's the ultimate form of deterrence. No one's going to launch their nukes knowing they'll be obliterated in return.
I don't know. The chance of somebody hitting the button by mistake is never zero.
You're right. Even with peace guaranteed by MAD, there's always the risk of an accident.
Nobody wants the world to end on account of some machines malfunctioning.
On the other hand, thanks to deterrence, we haven't had a world war since 1945. You gotta admit, it has been pretty peaceful.
Not that it matters to us.
People point at the nuclear arms and space races and call it a Cold War. I say if they're not shooting at each other, why not call it world peace?
Doesn't mean war is gone. Look at Korea. Look at Vietnam.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking in relative terms here. Besides, if war died out completely, we'd be SOL.
We're not warmongers.
And yet, we can't survive in a world that's at peace.
You got a point.
Let's see about the situation in Central America.
So it's been more than 10 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis, huh?
I don't think we'll ever forget it.
No kidding. Those 13 days starting October 15th, 1962, were probably the closest we ever came to all-out nuclear war. The Russians deployed nuclear missiles to Cuba. America responded with a naval blockade. Then Russia shot down an American spy plane. I was still a teenager back then, but I remember what it felt like to be one step away from nuclear war. The adults were freaking out.
If it wasn't for the Cuban Missile Crisis, there might never have been an Operation Snake Eater. And
What's the matter, Snake? It's not like you to get all hypothetical.
I guess not. It was the reassessment after the missile crisis that paved the way for the hotline between Moscow and Washington, and also for détente. That's irony for you.
The Treaty of Tlatelolco was enacted to make Latin America into a nuclear-free zone. It bans the testing, use, manufacture, production, acquisition, storage, and deployment of nuclear weapons. The impetus was pretty obvious. The series of crises triggered by the deployment of nukes in Cuba.
Not hard to imagine. Those 13 days had the whole world frozen in fear.
Of course, the country that started it all, Cuba, hasn't actually ratified it yet.
Still, the treaty's backed by over 20 countries. Anyone flouting it risks becoming an international pariah.
True. Opinol would investigate, no doubt. I heard they used Japan's 3 non-nuclear principles as their model when they drew up the treaty. I think the Treaty of Tlatelolco might have been their way of asking nuclear powers not to use nukes against them. That's the biggest difference between the treaty and the 3 principles. I guess you could call it a 4th principle.
So Costa Rica abolished its army back in, what, 1949? Pretty gutsy move for a Central American nation at the time.
Yeah, well, they'd just come out of a civil war. I'm sure they were driven by a desire to avoid another tragedy like Pa said. But I think they had a more compelling reason. Army coup d'etat are a way of life in so many Latin American countries. Imagine seeing that up close.
No army, no coup. Makes sense.
Plus, their economy was in ruins. So they honestly didn't have any money to spend on an army anyway.
Yeah, but weren't they on less than friendly terms with Nicaragua?
Yeah, and in fact, Nicaragua did end up invading. But the Civil Guard fought back and the OAS brokered a ceasefire. The US and the rest of the OAS had their back, and they used it to full advantage. For a quarter century, they survived in the powder keg of Central America. That must have taken some serious diplomacy. Even if the Civil Guard is pretty decked out for a police force.
Must be tough to be a country without an army.
Hey, Snake, mind if I ask you something?
Since when did you start asking permission?
So, you used to be part of a CIA paramilitary unit, right?
That's right.
Ever do any ops in Central America?
No, not personally. But there were other units who did all kinds of stuff.
I remember the Bay of Pigs invasion back in '61. The papers had a field day with it.
Operation Zapata. That was the CIA code name. The whole thing went south.
Then there was Che Guevara, being hunted down in Bolivia. I heard the CIA had a hand in that too.
There were several units similar to mine. MSP, SOG. They'd recruit former special forces, train them as intelligence agents, and send them on deniable covert paramilitary operations. One of those units trained the Bolivian army in counter-guerrilla tactics.
And then had them shoot El Che.
So the story goes.
Around here they say La CIA instead of CIA, huh?
Nothing strange about it. That's how it's pronounced when you read it in Spanish.
It has the feminine noun ending a, so they use the article la. Apparently some people have taken to using the term UCLA.
That's a new one to me. What's it mean?
It stands for Unilaterally Controlled Latino Assets.
Meaning they're local agents?
Yeah, that's the idea. Washington uses them like pawns. Nobody knows who they really are or what they're doing.
You were saying Japan has a peace constitution too.
Yep. Japan renounced war in Article 9 of its constitution, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order. The Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation, and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized.
You know it by heart.
Some things you never forget.
Impressive. There were some parts I didn't quite get, though. Like the whole means of settling conflicts thing.
Yeah, that's been the subject of debate. Whether or not it forbids any and all use of force. The current Constitution was originally drawn up under the Allied occupation. The first draft was even submitted by Allied GHQ. So naturally, there are some who feel the Constitution was imposed on Japan by foreigners.
Things like that are never simple. Same for every country, I guess.
One thing's for sure, though. Not having an army let Japan focus on economic recovery after the war. In that sense, it's the same as Costa Rica.
Kaz, you were in the Japanese Self-Defense Force, right? I thought that Article 9 you were talking about earlier prevented Japan from having an army.
Yeah, and that's another subject of controversy. The Self-Defense Force is an organization for the purpose of defense. Article 9 of the Constitution does not deny Japan's right to self-defense. Therefore, the SDF is constitutional. That's Tokyo's official stance.
Sounds complicated.
Call it what you will. It's a distinctly Japanese way of interpreting things.
The U.S. has military forces stationed in Japan, right?
Right. Even though the Allied occupation ended, American forces are still stationed there under the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty.
Unlike Costa Rica.
Part of it stems from the occupation, but Japan also occupies a key strategic position from America's perspective. It's next door to the Soviet Union and close to China and North Korea as well. It's integral to the security of Pacific Asia. For America, Japan represents a barrier against communism.
What about for Japan?
As you might expect, there's deep-rooted opposition to the alliance. In 1960 and 1970, when the treaty was up for revision, there were mass protest movements against it, especially in Okinawa. The U.S. only gave it back to Japan 2 years ago, and American bases are still concentrated there. It's a heavy burden for the Okinawans to bear.
Then why don't they scrap the treaty?
Lots of reasons. There's the imbalance of power with the U.S., of course, and if Japan pulled out, they'd be losing the nuclear umbrella America provides. And as for whether the JSDF could defend the country after the Americans left, I really couldn't say. Costa Rica is in a similar situation. They depend on the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance, the so-called Rio Pact.
So, the countries with peace constitutions end up having to rely on other countries' armies. Kind of ironic.
On the flip side, not everybody in America is satisfied with it either. Some people argue Japan is freeloading off America's security guarantee. And you know how Japan's industrial exports are making inroads in the States.
Yeah, I've got a Japanese camera myself. Best damn camera around.
Japan's low defense spending allows it to invest more in economic recovery and expand its share of the American market. That's a bitter pill for Americans to swallow. You know that today, Japan is under the American nuclear umbrella.
Right.
The U.S. vowed to retaliate against any country that launches a nuclear strike against an allied country. That promise deters nuclear attacks against America's allies, hence the term nuclear umbrella. But suppose the Russians nuke Tokyo. Would America really nuke Moscow in return? If they did, the Soviet Union would undoubtedly retaliate. Would Washington really be willing to risk having a bomb dropped on itself in order to avenge Japan? I'm not so sure.
Don't tell me you're still worried about Japan. After all these years?
It's not that.
To be honest, I'm not convinced either. But Moscow faces the same dilemma. Maybe Washington wouldn't retaliate on Japan's behalf. Then again, maybe it would.
So you're saying Moscow wouldn't want to risk being attacked either?
The whole concept of nuclear deterrence is entirely hypothetical to begin with. When you get down to it, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Japan shall not possess, manufacture, or allow the introduction of nuclear weapons into Japan. Those are the 3 non-nuclear principles set forth by the Japanese government.
Allow the introduction? That's funny. Some of the U.S. warships that visit Japanese ports are armed with nukes. Or are you going to tell me they transfer them at sea onto other ships every time they visit?
You raise a good point, Snake. But the Japanese government doesn't recognize it as such. The introduction of nuclear weapons into Japanese territory would need to be agreed upon in advance. America hasn't made any such agreements. Therefore, they aren't bringing nukes into Japan. That's the official excuse.
Doesn't sound like much of an excuse to me.
I don't blame you. Keep in mind, though, Japan suffered actual nuclear attacks. Anti-nuke sentiment there runs deeper than you think. I suppose the government's not really in a position to admit that sort of thing.
So tell me, Kaz, How's the self-defense force you were in different from an army?
The JSDF is set up for national defense. It's not configured for aggression against other countries. It's what you'd call exclusive defense.
Exclusive defense?
It's the fundamental strategic posture of the JSDF. No preemptive attacks. Only the minimum defensive action necessary after an enemy attacks.
Anything defined as self-defense, then?
The JSDF originated as the National Police Reserve. Back then, American forces stationed in Japan were being sent over to fight in the Korean War. So in a sense, the NPR was filling a gap.
Police, huh? Reminds me of the Costa Rican Civil Guard.
Yeah, exactly. They're also dispatched to provide disaster relief. The year before I joined, they had a hell of a time trying to rescue some buses that got hit by landslides.
So why'd you quit the JSDF?
Because I didn't have a reason to be in Japan anymore.
A reason?
My mom had died 3 years earlier, so I didn't have to care for her anymore. With her gone, there was no point hanging around in Japan.
Yeah, but a man with your talents could have risen pretty high in the ranks, I imagine.
I don't know what they made of me. Could be it actually alienated me from the brass. And personally, I could never get used to the idea of exclusive defense.
Meaning?
On a strategic level, I can see how a country could go with the exclusive defense model used by the JSDF. And I've got nothing against my fellow soldiers who believe in it. On a tactical level, though, it just rubbed me the wrong way. To put it simply, I was itching for a real fight.
I figured.
And I felt as long as I was in the JSDF, I'd never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with my father, who was in the U.S. Army. Seeing Yukio Mishima's suicide didn't help either.
Yukio Mishima, the guy who wrote The Temple of the Golden Pavilion.
The way he questioned the status quo hit home with me. Not that I admired his vision or anything, but it did get me thinking, that's for sure.
Alright, so we learned a little bit about the setting of the game as far as Costa Rica. We heard about the peace constitutions of Japan and Costa Rica. And we learned a little bit about the Cold War. It was almost like a history lesson. So we're going to learn a little bit about this setting from Paz's point of view. And we're going to hear her talk about Costa Rica.
Costa Rica means rich coast in Spanish.
Is it true that Columbus was the one who came up with the name?
Your guess is as good as mine. But it is true that Columbus landed his ships near Limon back in the age of exploration. He wrote in his diary that when he landed, the indigenous showered him with gifts of gold, hence the name. It sounds a little strange to me. There's no way they could find that much gold in Costa Rica.
Columbus originally set sail in search of the legendary land of gold. Maybe he was just nuts about the stuff.
Costa Rica is rich enough without it. Look at the forests and the animals and the peace-loving people. That is what I want to protect.
I know how you feel.
Democracy took root in Costa Rica before anywhere else in Central America. Sure, we had coup and dictators and all, but never a total meltdown. That is, until 26 years ago.
The Civil War. Yeah. I understand you lost your grandparents.
It started with a dispute over alleged fraud in the presidential election. What I do not understand is why friend turned against friend, when they could have talked it out instead.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Even today, some buildings still have bullet holes from the Civil War. A quarter century later, and it is a tragedy we Ticos cannot forget, must not forget. It was the year after the Civil War that the army was constitutionally abolished. A new president was elected this year, President Otaber. He seems to be distancing himself from the United States. He has limited the privileges granted to American banks, lifted the sanctions on Cuba. Our last president was so pro-US, people suspected he was in bed with the CIA.
You think the CIA is doing this because it feels threatened by the president's shift in policy?
It is possible, but would they really bring in such a huge army just because of that?
Part of our job is finding out.
Exactly. Thanks, Snake. Peace.
That coffee you guys brought us is pretty damn good.
Isn't it? Costa Rican coffee is the best. The Central Basin has all the right conditions for growing coffee. It is high in elevation, with steady temperatures and well-drained volcanic soils.
The professor certainly seems attached to it.
The coffee we drank on the boat coming over was awful. It put him in such a terrible mood.
Well, how come I never hear about Costa Rican coffee then?
Because it gets bought up by wholesalers and mixed with beans from other countries. It is really a shame. Such wonderful beans, and nobody knows they are from Costa Rica.
Huh. They should launch an ad campaign or something.
Right. I hope one day people will recognize Costa Rican coffee for what it is.
I'm with you there.
Costa Rica is said to have about 87,000 species of living things. That is about 5% of all the known species in the world.
A tiny place like this? Huh. I'll be damned.
I want to protect that biological diversity. When diversity is lost, the environment weakens. Just look at the plantations.
I think I know what you mean. It's like trying to assemble a unit from similar guys. It usually doesn't work out. Throw a few square pegs in there and everything falls into place.
There are so many species here that a lot of them have not even been classified yet. I am hoping I can help do that someday. Kind of like a parataxonomist.
Say that again?
Parataxonomist. Someone who helps a taxonomist.
Oh. Huh. I thought you were going to say it had something to do with parachutes.
You're weird.
That's like a little reference to that codec conversation he had with Paramedic, where she talked about medics that came in by parachute. Alright, so we listened to a lot of data files about the background of this game, the storyline, the setting, the policies. So let's get into this mission right here. We're gonna do this target practice mission right now.
Welcome to the shooting range. Just the place for a little target practice, huh? When you're done, head over to the exit.
Alright, so there's a reason I didn't even go into the mission prep, because this mission really isn't much to it. You can go right here to the target practice, and you can shoot at the targets as much as you want to, but this mission isn't graded, it isn't judged by anything. You can shoot at these things, you get points for hitting a target on the arms, the head, or the torso. But the main part of this mission is coming up here and getting this item, and it's a camouflage, like I said. It's the t-shirt camouflage that you can wear in any of the other missions. And that's pretty much all that this mission has to offer. Also, this mission will come up later in the game, an important part later in the game, and you'll see that later on in this walkthrough. But this mission really doesn't have much to offer. You can shoot at the targets, but, you know, whatever. Let's finish this mission right here.
Training exercise complete.
That's a lot less of a mission and more of getting your aiming straight and helping you be able to shoot targets, because this doesn't have the same kind of target acquisition system that Metal Gear Solid 3 or Metal Gear Solid 4 has. It has its own unique targeting system. So I guess that's what this mission was all about, helping you get ready and helping you get accustomed to the targeting in this game. You see, this mission doesn't even get a clear rank, so, you know, the main purpose of that mission is to get that camouflage up there, and also it comes in handy later on in the walkthrough. I don't want to spoil it, so I'll just go on about doing this right here. Nothing new happened in Mother Base, so we're going to go right back to the mission selection screen, and we're going to do the next mission. Alright, so 003 target practice score attack is basically the same thing as that last mission that we just did, except this one has a 3-minute time limit, and that 3-minute time limit is for you to shoot those targets that we saw and get as many points. Now you get 500 for headshots, I think it's 200 for body shots and 300 for limb shots, and you got 3 minutes to get as many points as you possibly can, and then you get a score rank, a clear rank at the end. And that clear rank is based on how many points you get in that 3 minutes.
Target practice commencing now. Shoot all the targets in the shooting range. When the timer reaches 0, the exercise is over.
Alright, so we know what the deal is here, but we still got some briefing files I want to go over. We're going to talk to Miller about the fundamentals of stealth.
Don't carry any more gear than you need. If you try and stuff your entire arsenal into your backpack, it'll be too heavy and your mobility will be impaired. You'll only be hurting yourself.
I know. Take only what you need. Every rookie knows that.
You can check the weight of your gear before heading out, so make sure you do.
Got it.
Even a born warrior like you gets hand tremor, Snake. It happens even when you're full of stamina, and it only gets worse when you're tired, especially with larger, heavier weapons. Obviously, you'll get better aim crouching than you will standing, and when you use a scope, setting your sights on a single point will gradually give you a more precise aim. As we develop better weapons at Mother Base, though, you may gain access to new, low-tremor versions of the same guns. So if you expect the shakes to be a problem, you might want to put some resources into R&D.
I'll keep it in mind. Then again, the more you use a weapon, the more your hands get used to it. Sometimes it pays to be faithful to your gun.
Choosing the right uniform is crucial. Pick one that matches the mission objective and your own combat style. Jungle fatigues are made for jungle combat. They provide decent protection and let you carry a fair number of weapons. Your standard uniform, basically. The distinguishing factor is that your camo index will vary a lot, depending on the area. Wear a pattern that makes you blend in with your surroundings, and your camo index goes up. Wear something that clashes, and you'll stick out like a sore thumb.
Pick the right pattern for the occasion. Sigint used to lecture me on it all the time.
Naked. That's exactly what you are with this uniform. The pants are the same as the jungle fatigues. Obviously, since you're exposing your bare skin, your defense and camo index are gonna be low. On the plus side, it's so light you can move around quicker.
Good for showing off muscles, too.
Hey, Snake, I heard they gave you your old code name because you used to run around with your shirt off. Is that true?
Don't believe everything you hear. They called me naked because I went in without gear or food. I had to procure everything on site.
You mean they sent you into the jungle without even a pair of pants? On a halo jump from 35,000 feet? Sweet Jesus, you are a legend.
You're busting my balls, aren't you, Kaz?
Little bit, yeah.
Hilarious.
Snake, about cardboard boxes. It feels kind of weird me explaining this stuff to you, but there have been a few recent developments in cardboard box technology. So just to be safe, here goes.
Go on.
You can do much more with a box than just hide under it. You can put it someplace and leave it there.
Huh?
You can get on top of it and use it to reach high places, or hide from the enemy in its shadow.
I like what I'm hearing so far.
And that's not all. You can even put items in it and send them to co-op's teammates.
Really? I never thought of any of that. Damn. Is there anything a cardboard box can't do? Every soldier should have one.
Yeah, well, don't get too excited. This isn't exactly what they were made for.
Which reminds me, don't you think the boxes around here are a little on the big side?
You're right. I bet 2 people could fit under one box, if they packed in tight enough. They call them love boxes.
Love boxes?
Of course, you don't need a love box to fit 2 people inside. Any box of similar size will do. Up to 2 people can fit inside a cardboard box.
Tell me how.
Move close to a box with a teammate inside, and an icon will appear. Then press the action button. You'll stay inside as long as the action button is pressed.
So, same as snake formation, huh?
Exactly the same. In fact, when you put on a cardboard box when snake in, both of you can climb inside.
A box big enough to hold me and my buddy. These are fine times we live in, hey, Kaz?
Yeah, sure, boss. Snake, about that cassette player Galvez was carrying.
What about it?
That was no Russian imitation. It was the real deal. A prototype developed by a Japanese company.
Get out of here.
It's true. It had the Sony logo on it. The product name is Walkman.
Walkman.
It's a revolutionary new concept. Music you can listen to on the go. You can take it with you when you leave the house. I gave it a listen, and you wouldn't believe how good the sound quality is for something so tiny. And in stereo, too. Think of the technology that must have gone into it. And that tape is equally amazing. The treble range is clearly superior to any other cassette ever made. Stylish, too.
How'd Galvez get his hands on a model that's not even out yet?
Beats me. It's not the kind of thing I'd expect some stodgy Soviet to be into.
Me neither. Tell you what, though, it's a fine piece of work. It'll let me listen to my music when I want, where I want.
I never thought I'd hear you say that, but I have to agree. Me? I'm a recording freak, and I always used to laugh at the idea of a portable player. But now that I've seen it in action, I've changed my mind. Being able to take your music with you, this could be the start of a revolution in music.
Could be.
I'm having the guys at Mother Base study and analyze it. Who knows? They might be able to come up with something even better.
These boys are marveling over Walkman. Wait till they get a little bit older and see the foolishness that we got now. Alright, so this mission, we're gonna go into mission prep. And this mission is good for leveling up your weapons. Now, like Snake was saying, it pays to be loyal to your gun. So, if you use these guns in these target practice missions, you'll level them up. I have a rank 1 gun, level 1 gun. Now, using your gun in missions will help you increase the level of the gun from level 1 to 2 to 3. Now, through R&D, you can increase the rank. Increasing the rank is a whole lot better than increasing the level, but it always helps to increase the level. So we only have, we got a M16, M1C, and a loss. I'm gonna use the M16 in this mission right here, and we're gonna see if we can level that up.
Hit as many targets as you can before time runs out.
Now, I did say I was going to use the M16, but I thought about it, and it's probably better for me to use the M22, because this is the weapon I'm going to be using most during story mode, as I'm going to be trying to knock out dudes. I missed completely on that one. As I'm going to be trying to knock out dudes and recruit them back to MSF, so I'm going to have a Mark 22 with a high level. And we're getting headshots all day right here. Oh, fucking jinxed that one. Oh, don't move. You see my weakness. Moving targets right here. Probably pays for me to switch over to M16, seeing as these things are at a little bit of a range. And what I'm trying to do right here is just get as many points as I possibly can. I got about 2 minutes left. And this is gonna help me level up my guns. But if I get a nice high score, I'm gonna get an S rank on this mission. And there is a trophy for getting an S rank on all the main ops and all the side ops. So I'm gonna try to get as many S ranks as possible. But like I said before, I don't want to throw grenades. I'm not gonna be worried about the S rank so much, as I'm gonna be worrying about telling the story of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, including all the data files and all the briefing files for the missions. Oh. I missed that one completely. The more times you go through these sets of targets, you can notice that the pattern at which they pop up kind of repeats itself. The more you go through these sets of targets, is the faster that they disappear, and the less time you have to get your aim straight at aiming at them. It helps you get your aim down better. I haven't played this game in a while, so you're gonna see my aim is terrible at the beginning, and hopefully throughout the course of me playing this game, throughout the course of this walkthrough, it gets better. Or it's gonna get worse and I'm gonna die a whole lot. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And they're disappearing and popping up real fast now, so I'm just gonna try to pop them as fast as I possibly can, not worry so much about headshots. And with 16 seconds left, this mission is just about done. I missed that last one. 11 seconds. Let's see if we can get a couple more targets. Oh, I gotta reload. That one's gonna disappear on me. Alright, 3 seconds left. Alright, so we got 22,400 points. I don't know what it takes to get an S rank, but we're gonna see what rank we got in this mission right here. Hopefully it's an S rank, because that's a bad mission to have to repeat again to get a high rank. Oh, that's that victory music. We got an S rank on the target practice score attack, and you can see my level is getting increased. That's how much I gotta get into the next level of both the M22 and the M16A1. We got that S rank. I definitely will take that. And we're gonna move on to another mission.